It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Come cheer up my lads, come cheer up my lads. It's better to have loved and lost. It's better to have loved and lost. Captain Jean-Luc Picard and never to have loved at all. The Federation Starship, come cheer up my lads, come cheer up my lads. It's better to have loved and lost. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. 17346732147 Charlie 327897777643 Tango 732 Victor 731178873247678976476. Lock. When I have plucked the rose, G.O. Grey hot. Longing still for that which longer nurseth the disease. In faith, I do not love thee. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? When I have plucked the rose, longing still for that which longer nurseth the disease. In faith, I do not love thee. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Come cheer up my lads, come cheer up my lads. 'Tis better to have loved and lost. Incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic. No one had a chance to interrupt. It was quite hypnotic. Incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic. No one had a chance to interrupt. It was quite hypnotic.
That's an interesting twist.
Transmitting live from the Asylum Studios, deep in the bowels of Southwest Texas. It's the Joe Rooz Show. The show where we talk about anything and everything. Where nothing is sacred, nothing is watered down, and nothing is PC.
All righty. Hey, folks, this is Joe Rooz, and it is great to be with you once again at the Asylum Studios, broadcasting live from the Pimple on the backside of Texas, the beautiful city of Eagle Pass, and doing the very best we can to bring you the best quality talk radio we can muster without all the bluster. Welcome to the Joe Rooz Show. And hey, guess what? It's Friday! Finally flipping Friday. Man, I thought this week was never going to end. I really did. Yesterday, stupid story, yesterday, I got back to the house. I came to the studio, and I'm like, I'm getting myself ready here. I'm thinking yesterday was today, and I'm freaking out because I have no internet. There's a service outage in the area, no internet, and I'm like, I got a show. What am I going to do? I'm panicking. I'm calling my provider. I'm doing all that great stuff, trying to figure out why I don't have internet. Thinking, oh man, did I pay the bill? No, but I did. And it turns out there was a service outage. So I'm going crazy. I'm like, I'm reaching out to my producer. I'm like, hey, do me a favor. I got Dan Wade. He's going to be coming on the show tonight. You got to reach out to this guy. Let him know we're running behind. There's a problem with the internet, all that stuff. I'm writing out this long text to her. And then I realized it's Thursday. Stupid. I know. But it was just one of those weeks. I could not wait. Oh, man, this is just not my night. Hate having the garbage pail in the shot, man. I hate it. See, and this is the thing with doing a live show. You see, there's no fixing this in post. There's no, oh, let me start again, and no. So what you do when you're doing a live show and you have these little screw ups is you try to make a funny out of it, and that's what we're doing. So, but anyway, folks, we got a show for you tonight. I am really looking forward to talking to our guest tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun because I think we may have been separated at birth at some point, just because of our philosophies on a few things. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation tonight, and I hope you guys are ready. Get a notebook, get a pencil, get yourself ready to go because we're going to be talking about taxation. Taxation is theft. All right, that's going to give you a clue as to the conversation we're having tonight. And so I'm looking forward to it. Cannot wait to get there. Hope you guys had a great day yesterday, at least better than mine, freaking out thinking we didn't have any internet. And then let's see, why is this not working now? This is, see, here we go. Anyway, hope you guys are ready for the weekend. I am ready for the weekend. I got a busy day tomorrow. I have a lot of stuff going on tomorrow here at the Asylum. We're going to be playing around with a bunch of different things. So we're going to hopefully change some things around. And then we're going to be doing some adjustments coming up in the days ahead. And then don't forget we're taking off some shows for the Christmas break here. So we'll just do one show on Monday, and then we're off for the week. And then we'll be back on Sunday with our Sunday Bible study show. So that's that. And I want to say welcome to the folks that are watching on Instagram right now. I don't know if I like being on Instagram, to be honest with you. I don't like I'm looking at the monitor here and I see myself, and instead of being a landscape, it's a portrait, and it's like right in my face. So I'm really curious to see how it's going to look when we bring our guest in. That's going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to look. So this is the first time I'm doing it. So well, we'll see. We'll see. All right. Hope guys were able to catch the show on Wednesday night. We had a great conversation, a 3-hour show Wednesday night. That was a lot. We had Johnny Jordan in the first hour, and then we had he's gonna kill me, Tony Bradshaw. There we go. I was saying Ted for some reason. Tony Bradshaw, second hour, and then we had one of our producers on the show, Wayne Rankin, for the third hour. So it was a busy Wednesday night. And maybe that's why I was all screwed up yesterday. I don't know. But folks, hey, listen, don't forget, this is a live show weeknights, 7 p.m. Central Time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends, your family, and your followers. Help us get the show found. When you mess around with the like button and the sharing, it helps with the algorithm. It gets the show spread out there. And we are one away from our goal on Rumble. We need 520. We're at 519. So come on, folks. Let's do something tonight. Like the show on Rumble. Get on there. Please get on the show. Follow the show on Rumble. Let's do that. We don't really care about YouTube. I have strikes on YouTube already. Any day now they're going to pull the plug on me. That's why our home base is Rumble. Free speech, no problems, no concerns, and we're good to go. All right. I don't want to keep our guest waiting too much longer here, so how about we get into some of our sponsors? All right. First and foremost, Podhome. Podhome.fm is the most modern and easy-to-use podcast hosting platform you're going to find on the market today. Use it to publish your episodes, enhance your audio, automatically generate chapters, titles, transcripts, show notes, cover art, chapter art, all that great stuff. And you can even podcast live, which is exactly what we're doing. We're not only on the video stream live, we're also streaming our audio live. And, of course, that's being broadcast across all of the modern podcast 2.0 platforms like Podcast Guru and Fountain.fm and Podverse and Pocket Casts and Podhome and all those great platforms. And, of course, it's also streaming on our website. So if you went to our website right now, we have this neat little media player up on the homepage. You can listen to the live audio right there and check out all of the archived episodes as well. All because Podhome gives you the HTML code to put that on your website. Free. And another thing that you get with Podhome, if say you're just starting out in your podcast journey, as they say, well, guess what? Maybe you don't have a website yet. No problem. Podhome gives you a website too. So you get all of that for one affordable monthly subscription of $15.99. That's it, just $15.99 a month. And if you sign up today, you get 30 days free. So check them out. Podhome.fm. Podhome.fm. I've been with them for 3 years. They're a great platform, great company. Love working with these guys. So check them out. Podhome.fm. All right. And let's see. Pro HVAC right here, local, Eagle Pass, folks. Pro HVAC Solutions leverages over 30 years of expertise to provide premier HVAC sales and repair services, specializing in both residential and commercial installations. Pro HVAC's team of skilled technicians is dedicated to providing efficient heating, ventilation, and air conditioning solutions for your home or business. With a focus on quality workmanship and customer satisfaction, Pro HVAC ensures your comfort all year round. Contact Pro HVAC R Solutions. That's Pro HVAC R Solutions today for reliable HVAC services tailored to your need. Website's up on the screen there, folks. ProHVACRsolutions.com. That's ProHVACRsolutions.com. The R is for refrigeration, by the way, just in case anybody's asking. All right. Also, don't forget to head over to our website, joerooz.com. And when you get over there, open up that contact form. Send us over a message. Let us know whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, any questions, comments, cares, or concerns that you might have. Maybe you shouldn't, but maybe you have a complaint. Send it on over to us. Let us know what you're thinking. All right. It's really important to us. Maybe you have an idea for a guest you'd like to have on the show or a topic for a show. Let me know. Love to hear from you guys. And if you don't want to use the web form, totally fine with me. You can always email me directly at info@joerooz.com. That's info@joerooz.com. Also, while you're on the website, look for that support page, all right, and check that out. Remember, this is a value for value show, and all that simply means is that if you are getting anything of value from the content we're putting out, we're asking you return that value to us in the form of a donation. That could be your time, your talent, or your treasure. No matter how you want to go about it, leave it up to you. And listen, if you feel like you're getting $1's worth of value from what we're doing, hey, send us $1. That's great. We appreciate it. Every little bit helps as it comes in, and we really do need the support. We want to try to keep this thing going, and we don't expand going into the new year. So help us out. Don't forget, support page. Plenty of ways to help us out, and we'll go over all those different ways at the end of the show before we wrap it up. All right, now, today, our guest, and I'm telling you, folks, this is going to be a great conversation. I am looking forward to it. Our guest is Dan, Taxation Is Theft, Berman. He's an author, activist, and one of the most controversial voices challenging taxes, the Federal Reserve, and government authority. Dan claims he hasn't paid income tax in over 10 years, hasn't held a driver's license in nearly 20, and says he has the IRS and says that he has the IRS correspondence to back it all up. Now, whether you think he's exposing a broken system or just pushing the limits, we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. Dan, welcome to the show, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let me turn that off. There we go. Okay. I'm a one-man operation, bud. So there's going to be little hiccups and little goofs. And like I said, it's the joys of doing a live show. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, the energy is a lot different doing a live show compared to doing a recorded show. So that's why I like it. And plus, I'm lazy. I don't want to edit. So it just makes it that much better. So Dan, so give us a background here. Tell us about yourself. Who are we talking to tonight?
Give me 1 second. This is what we do on live shows. I got a technical difficulty here.
Go for it. Well, I'll wait.
All right. Hit me with that one more time.
Okay. So tell us who you are. What's going on?
Yeah. So I'm Dan, Taxation Is Theft, Berman. It's ever since I was a small child, I was always pushing back on stuff, right? Like my mom would tell me you have to go to school. And I'm like, why do I have to do that? Right. And I kind of held on to that, right? They usually kind of beat that out of us as kids going to school. But I think I held on to it for too long. And getting older, I started fighting traffic tickets, got into trouble with credit cards when I was, late teens, early 20s.
You didn't.
Yeah, everybody goes through that. Most people go through that. And I learned how to fight that. So I was fighting banks. I got sued by a couple banks and pushed back and won. I actually sued a debt collector that was trying to collect something for AT&T and got a $6,000, $7,000 payout out of that. That was that was pretty nice. But like through all this, I've just learned that there's all these systems out there. And there's like the legal system, which is it's actually a pretty fair system sometimes. And then there's like all this other stuff that's like built around it, which is like how to rip us off. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting here thinking the rules are to follow what the people ripping us off are telling us to do. When realistically, it's like, if you just cut through that and play by a completely different set of rules, there's actually a lot of stuff that's in our favor. And so I guess what I've been doing over the past decade or so is trying to really figure out how I can help, the average person push back against these systems, because there's not really there aren't many people out there trying to help us. Even the lawyers and accountants and everything are usually on the sides of the tax collectors, the legal systems, and the prosecutors and everything else. So it's really difficult to push back or to find somebody to help. So I've kind of been, my mission has been to reveal all this information and give everybody the tools so that we can push back and get a little bit more, justice on our side.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start you off with some questions. I love to ask ice-breaking questions. So if you've listened to any of the shows or checked out any of the prior shows, you know that there's something coming. So I'm going to ask you this: who's somebody, past or present, that you would love to have a 2-hour coffee with?
Oh man, I would say it's impossible now, but Irwin Schiff, who he was kind of a big inspiration. I don't know if you know who he is, but he kind of he wrote this book called The Federal Mafia,
Mhm.
and he was one of the grandfathers of like this whole idea of there's no law that says anyone has to pay the income tax. He went to prison for it. They tried to ban his book. I've read through tons of his court cases. I actually corresponded with him when he was in prison and still alive. I would love to talk to this guy. And like I said, I know the first thing that jumps into everybody's mind is, but he went to prison and all this other stuff. I like to use the analogy, like he's of him and the Challenger, the rocket that NASA shot up into space that blew up and killed everybody on board.
Mhm.
And that was him. Like he was on the new frontier. He was trying to figure something out, and he made some mistakes, but we can learn from that. Like we shoot rockets into space almost every day now. The laws of physics haven't changed. We just understand them better. And so he was onto something. And I continued the research. I continued, looking for other people who did the same research. But yeah, I think I think that would be a great guy to sit down and have some coffee with.
I think so too. I know who he is. I'm familiar with his book. I haven't read the book entirely. I've read bits and pieces out of it, but yeah, so I know who you're talking about. So yeah, that would be a fascinating one. I like that. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
All right. So if your GPS could talk in a celebrity voice, who would you want it to be and why?
Oh man, I always like the Samuel L. Jackson one.
Okay. All right, that's good.
Because I'm usually swearing at stuff, especially when I miss a turn. That would probably be a good one.
Mine is William Shatner.
Nice.
I want William Shatner as Captain Kirk reading my GPS coordinates. I think that would be a lot of fun.
There's this on the topic of your intro song that you had there. There's this song called "Ordinary People" that has William Shatner in it. I don't know if you've heard this.
Yes, I know that one. That's great.
I don't know how or where I found that, but I love that song.
Oh yeah. Oh, and you're talking about the Picard thing I was playing, right? Yeah, I got that from YouTube. It's whose guy's name is Pogo, Pogo, and he has a bunch of stuff like that. I lifted a few things, and I give credit. I put credit up there so YouTube doesn't say anything and complain about it. I put the credit up there. But yeah, I rotate a few of them. One of my favorite ones is the M&M's one. You'll catch that one day.
All right,
it's always a lot of fun. So that's great, man. That's great. So let's get into this, because this is we got a lot of stuff to talk about here. So before the controversy and before the headlines, you were working regular jobs, tech, Fortune 500 companies. Why don't you kind of walk us through the version of your life, or how that version of your life turns into Taxation Is Theft?
Man, well, let me say this. I'm still working for big tech. That's kind of my day job. And when I started out, my 20-year-old self would look at me now and be like, you sell out. I was always never going to work a corporate job. Luckily, it's all remote now, right? So that's how I've been doing it, because you would never be able to get me in a cubicle. So I think, okay, so this is interesting. I call myself a high school dropout because I graduated probably only because No Child Left Behind. But I mean, like my grades were terrible. I couldn't pay attention. I especially hated history and you know, any kind of like government class or anything like that, which I love that stuff now because it's relevant. I loved math and science, but like, you know, English literature and stuff, never really got through it. So so I had bad grades there, and I did take a little bit of community college, but I just kind of dropped out. But at the same time, I had access to, you know, this is my privilege growing up, right? They say everyone has access to the same opportunities, but I think that's actually kind of a lie. Like I had access to stuff just because my dad was he was a developer for, you know, early companies, like when they were using those weird old languages. But like I had access to a computer when I, you know, in the early 80s, like those old ones they make fun of in old movies, right?
Yeah.
I had access to that kind of stuff, and I just started learning programming and video production. Part of me wanted to, you know, make movies. I was like writing scripts. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I did a lot of you know, production jobs. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I got into a lot of like film industry stuff. And I was doing that. And then I was just kind of like, not liking this so much. I didn't like the unions and like all this other stuff that was in that industry. So I switched to software development and did like freelance, you know, everything. But I was always trying to entrepreneur it, right? I was always trying to build websites and sell my own stuff and do stuff like that. So at some point I was just like, you know what, enough is enough. Let me make some real money. And I got some corporate jobs that I never thought I could get because I had no college degree or anything. But I had a ton of experience because I had like been learning all this stuff of my own free will because I actually enjoyed it. And so now I'm kind of in the industry. I don't think a lot of people know that I didn't go to college for this. But I'm like, I mean, like I'm leading teams and, you know, teaching other developers who are, you know, pretty smart people.
Right.
And so, yeah, so there's my whole
See,
lecture on college.
Proves the point. It just proves the point.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to have that piece of paper that says, oh, to me, no, all a college degree to me says, and listen, I have education. I went to college. I did all that stuff. All right. And so I'm not, you know, speaking from a point of ignorance here. All a degree tells you is, or an employer is that you're trainable. That's really all it is. Because you're not taught to critically think on anything. You're only taught to spew out and regurgitate the talking points that whatever the professor that you have wants you to learn and wants you to know, and that's all it is. So to me,
and this is
says you're trainable.
And this is like, you know, we can get into this more when we talk about like CPAs and tax attorneys and all this other stuff. But like they're essentially like all trained by the IRS and the tax organization. So they're doing what they're told for, you know, for the exact reason you just said. They're not taught how to, you know, they're not even taught the history of, you know, these taxes or where they come from. They're just taught, you know, this is how you fill out the forms.
There's no critical thought to it. It's just you're trainable. That's all it is. That's really all it is. Now, what I found really fascinating though, when I was reading up on your bio and your profile and such, and I should say, because our show is part of the podcast, the Podmatch podcasting network, which we're very proud to be a part of. And that's how you and I connected, through Podmatch. So if you haven't been on Podmatch yet, folks, if you're interested in something like that, check it out, podmatch.com. Okay, plug done. So one of the things that I found really interesting is that you've worked in all of these companies, Fortune 500 companies, tech, so on and so forth. And you refuse to pay, or not that you refuse to pay, you refuse to file. There's a difference between paying and filing.
Yeah.
How did those two worlds collide?
So it's interesting, and like it's always a different situation. It's, you know, whether I'm a full-time employee or a contractor. If you're contracting, you can negotiate certain terms where you can, you know, get a 1099 instead of a W-2. There's all kinds of little differences, but actually it's kind of been great that I've seen basically, you know, every way that they tax people. And so I've been able to fight, you know, basically every single thing. I've been through them all myself. There's not a whole lot of them, right? W-2 and 1099. And then there's the 1099s from like stockbrokers and investments and stuff. But so I've kind of been in all of them. I've been in a position where my employer did not report to the IRS just because it was a terrible company, and they just, like, I'm sure, you know, they weren't doing me a favor. They just lost the paperwork.
Nice.
Or maybe it was a few years ago, the IRS burned hundreds of thousands of they call them information returns, where the employer sends the information to the IRS. They burned a ton of those because they had too many and they couldn't process them. So maybe that's why they didn't have it. But long story short, you can always do and caveats and warnings and everything. Assuming your income is not actually taxable by law, you can when you do the form for withholding, you can mark it exempt, which means they're not going to withhold anything. They're still going to withhold Social Security and all these other taxes, Medicare and everything. I've been able to get those back 100% return. Sometimes they even return them with interest. As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, you're gonna have to teach us all this because
yeah, that's actually the next book that I'm working on is going to have all this, and it's got all of my correspondence with the IRS and everything. But I post a lot of that stuff, on my X account. But yeah, and then there's 1099 where they don't withhold anything; they just report it to the IRS. The problem with that is, if you don't file, the IRS is probably going to come after you at some point and say, "Hey, give us some money." There's also a law that says, if they have withheld anything, you can't get any of it back unless you file. So even if you don't have any taxable income and you're not a taxpayer, you still have to file just to get that money back. And by doing that, you also prevent them from doing a substitute file, which is the same thing they do with the 1099s, where they, calculate for you and send you a bill. And so I actually have filed for a lot of years, but when I file, I basically, I dispute the fact that I had any taxable income, and if there was anything withheld, they owe it to me. And this has been working so far so good. I know a lot of people are like, no, you're slipping through the cracks, and they just haven't caught on yet. It would, if I had to pay taxes on this money, they would have had enough huge red flags that the system would have rejected it. Because think about it, they withheld money, which means somebody not only reported it to the IRS, but also sent them money. Mm-hmm. And then they sent that money back to me after I told them my income was not taxable. So, if what I'm saying is wrong, then the IRS would have said, we're not going to send you back that money because I don't know why they sent us this money. But if you didn't have any taxable income, there would be no reason for us to send it to you. That would be the thing, right? And so realistically, it's just all like this system of smoke and mirrors that they've created to tax the crap out of all of us. And there's a whole history of how and why and everything else. But this is the system that we live under. And it's unfortunate that most people are falling for it because of, just decades of propaganda. That's what they've been told, and everything else. But it's man, there's so many different ways to talk about this, because it's an unjust system if they're doing what is actually legal. It's an unjust system if they're not doing what's actually legal. And it's like, either way, we're all getting robbed. So, we need to stop doing this, because it's we're funding wars that we don't believe in. We're funding, police to shoot innocent people. We're funding all these things that we all hate. We're funding corporate subsidies, for corporations that we absolutely hate. So it's insane. So we have to stop paying all this stuff as best as we can.
Yeah, I agree with you. You talk about when they file.
Sorry, I lost my audio again.
Okay. Text 1, 2.
There we go. Okay.
So you talk about how they file for you. Basically, they do the submission for you, and they don't take any consideration into any deductions. They don't take any consideration as they tax you at the highest rate they possibly can under their interpretation of law. And there's just no mercy whatsoever. And then they tell you, well, you're not paying your taxes. Well, obviously I'm paying my taxes, and it's coming out of my paycheck every 2 weeks. They're being paid. I'm just not filing. I'm not reporting it. You already know it. So why do I have to tell you?
Yeah, and it's worse than that, because what they'll actually do is let's say you have I'm going to turn my headphones off because they're doing something weird. What they'll do often is they'll wait for maybe 3 to 5 years, so that when they do send you that bill, they're basically, they're going to add on penalties and interest and all this other stuff, which is why didn't you just do this, the first year, when I wouldn't have had to owe all these penalties and interest. But you're right. And what's also interesting is for most people who have the money withheld, they're overpaying. So, a lot of these people, if they don't file, the IRS is actually happy about it, and they're not going to file for you and say, "Hey, you know what? We did some math here, and we took too much money. We're going to send it back to you." If you did that, they're just going to quietly be like, it's going to be like Office Space, where, where they're like, "Oh, we didn't send the guy his check. We're just gonna, forget that it happened." So it's crazy, but that's kind of how they approach the whole thing.
Yeah, and dealing with states also is a lot different. You and I were talking before the show. We're not going to go into detail about all that stuff that we spoke about, but states are different than the IRS. I found that dealing with state taxing offices is a lot more painful than dealing with the IRS. For some reason, it seems like the IRS just says, whatever, and just unless you owe them like tons and tons of money, then they're not going to let you go. But I know that dealing with states, especially blue states, these liberal states, they're just horrendous, like merciless. They just don't care, don't want to know anything. So it's the things that you're doing with the federal stuff is, can you do that same routine with states?
Yeah. So
state income tax.
So there's a few things to say about that. So first of all, I mentioned earlier, the IRS has a 10-year statute of limitations on collection, and they have this non-collection status where, they won't, they'll leave your bank accounts alone and everything for 10 years until the debt, disappears. California gives themselves 20 years. I don't know what New York does. But what's interesting about like all these states with this income tax is all of the states that have an income tax are based on the federal income tax. So and they have this, like, if you look at the laws for the states, like they refer directly to the federal income tax and the federal tax code. And so so if your money is not taxable at the federal level, it's not taxable at the state level. And so probably what everyone wants to see is the smoking gun, right? Is it actually possible not to pay this tax? That's what people really want to know. And I haven't lived in a state that's collected tax like that in a very long time. So I haven't had to beat one of those states. But I can say that along my journey of learning all this information, there have been some really great people that I've met. Pete Hendrickson he wrote a book called Cracking the Code, and he really lays out a lot of how you beat the bureaucratic system of this. And his, if I can plug his website, it's losthorizons.com. It's on that website. He has people who have been following his system, and he claims his numbers are somewhere around 100,000 people. I don't know, I wouldn't know what his exact numbers are, but he has people posting their success, their receipts, including checks from, Chicago, Illinois, California, New York, Pennsylvania, like most of the states that have income tax are all there. So it is possible to beat them. They all run on the same system. And I think it's because, they all go to meetings and they share tips and tricks on how to rip people off. Yeah. I can tell you, the criminal justice system especially for traffic tickets, they use a lot of the same techniques, where they basically get people to snitch on themselves, use words that they don't understand out of context, and basically get people to snitch on each other, or confess to things that they don't know they're confessing to, and that's how they get you. So it's the same system that all the states use, and the state income taxes are all based on the federal income tax. So if you can beat one, you can kind of beat them all. And there's proof that people have done that.
Now, could you kind of run us through how we even came about having a federal income tax?
Sure. So it goes back, you can probably go back to like the Civil War, right? We had an income tax created around the Civil War to fund the war. And it was, it went on, it was repealed, replaced, changed, went through different iterations. But around 1889, there was actually a ruling on it by the Supreme Court that said it was unconstitutional. And the reason for that was because it was direct and unapportioned. And just to give you an idea of the difference between direct and indirect, there's not really an indirect, but they call them excise taxes, which is basically anything that's not direct. Direct is, a tax on property. You own property, you have to pay a tax. indirect is basically a tax on a privilege, or, you know, if you want to bring something into the country, that's a privilege. And they call it like, you know, we look at this and say, well, that should be a right if I want to carry my property. But it's, according to the government, it's, we have the ability to say, you know, you can't do that, and we can make that illegal. And so therefore the fact that you're doing it means that it's a privilege, right? So anything that's a privilege is called an excise. Buying gasoline, buying alcohol, making alcohol, all these other things, these are all excises. The direct taxes have to be apportioned. Now, of course, the government was pissed off that they lost this huge source of revenue, right? So they were like, how do we get around this? How do we create another income tax? So they created the 16th Amendment. And a lot of people think that solved the problem. The 16th Amendment was passed in 1913. A lot of people challenged the validity of the ratification, which, you know, yeah, there's some stuff there, but honestly, it's completely irrelevant. And I can get into all the reasons why. But basically in 1916 and 1918, there were two Supreme Court cases. One was called Brushaber. The other one was Baltic Mining Company, or Baltic Mining Company. And they both basically said the 16th Amendment gave Congress no new power of taxation. So all it did was, it said that an income tax is now confined, with that amendment, is confined to the category of taxes which it inherently belonged in the first place, which was an excise, right?
Right.
So, and the reason for this was because the original Constitution still says all direct taxes must be apportioned. That was never removed. So you would have basically two phrases in the Constitution at different places, one in the amendment, one in the original articles, that were conflicting. That's terrible, right? That basically nullifies the whole thing. So they said, okay, look, this is how we're going to interpret that. We're going to say, okay, yes, you can have an unapportioned income tax because it's an excise, right? It's not a direct tax, it's an excise. This was 100 years ago, but they reiterated this clear as day in 2024 in a case, Moore, I think it was Moore versus US, where they said the same thing. The income tax is an excise. It's not a direct tax. Now you go to the IRS's website and they tell you, yeah, it's a direct tax and the 16th Amendment certified it. But if you also dig into the IRS website, they'll tell you, don't trust anything on this website. It's not the law.
which is crazy when you think about the fact that this is the agency that's commissioned to disrupt your life entirely.
Right.
And they're even telling you that, well, you know, it's really, but they bury it so far down in their documentation that unless you have time to sit there and find it, you'll never find it and never challenge it. People just do it because they're told you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane. And I mean, you go to their website, there's all kinds of misinformation on their website. And I mean, pretty much every branch of government does this, right? Like the law has very specific definitions, right? So, for example, in Title 26, the tax code, it defines what a trade or business is. But if you go to the IRS website and say, what's a trade or business, which they don't tell you that it's one, like trade or business is treated as one word. It's one term. And, you know, they make it sound like, well, if you're engaged in a trade or a business, then you have a trader, which is not what the definition says at all. So like, but these are the kind of tricks that they do to make you think like, oh, I guess my income must be taxable because I'm engaged in a trade or business, but nobody is. Almost nobody is. So yeah, they depend on all this like misleading information and everything. But anyway, so this income tax was created. That was the amendment in 1913. The income tax came shortly after, and nobody paid this all the way up until World War II. When they basically started income tax withholding, because they were like, oh, we got a war, right? Anything in a time of an emergency, right? We can get away with anything, whether it's forcing everyone to wear masks when they don't have the authority, or, you know, starting a war with Afghanistan when they don't have the authority, indefinite detention, you know, all these other things that they do in time of emergency.
Well, it's like the saying goes, you don't waste. Just flip that on my head. You don't waste
sometimes you create it.
Yeah.
You create the emergency. So World War II was their justification for starting payroll withholding, and now everyone's paying it, and, you know, without questioning the law, without questioning, do we actually nobody was challenging it back then, right? Because everybody was like, oh, it's the patriotic thing to do. We have to, you know. So we all got it.
But prior to the withholdings, you had to save your money, you had to file your return, and then they would tell you how much you had to pay, and you would have to send the check.
But even then, it was such a small percentage of people doing it because, for one, it was mostly businesses and corporations.
Mhm.
The tax brackets were so high that you had to be making the equivalent of like 200 grand today. So nobody was paying it. They like you can look up the numbers for it. I can't say for sure what they were, but they were less than 1 million like returns coming in before that. So, nobody was paying it. Plus, they didn't really have a massive IRS to use as the enforcement arm for this. Now, people always point to like Al Capone and be like, oh, that's how they got him, tax evasion and all this other stuff. Yeah. So interestingly enough, he was actually doing prohibited businesses, alcohol sales, which, after they legalized it, but heavily taxed it. And so basically he was actually, he had, there's a transcript of a conversation that he had when he was sitting down and negotiating with the IRS, where he was basically like, here's my book. And they were arguing over, the details of whether or not it was real, whether he had a different set of books and all this other stuff. So, yeah, he got pinned with evasion. He never tried to, quote unquote, attack the tax and say, I don't have to pay it, I'm not obligated, anything like that. So totally different story. But you look at the IRS throughout history, and it's always been used as a political weapon. Like Obama did it, Bush did it, Clinton did it, everybody did it, Reagan, literally everybody.
Yeah. Well, and just to go back to the withholdings, another thing about the withholdings, I think that if people actually had to sit back in every paycheck, take out money and put it in the bank, and then at the end of the year have to write a check for the amount that they have to pay in taxes, in federal tax, income tax, quote unquote income tax. I don't think organizations like the IRS and the amendment creating this tax would still be around.
Yeah,
I think there would be such public outcry over it. They do withholdings, you don't really feel it. You get your check, you get your check in every 2 weeks or how often you get paid. You see that little amount that's taken out, but compound that over the course of the entire year, and you realize how much money you actually paid out in taxes. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
really,
that's the psychological aspect to it.
yeah.
A lot of people get that check and they're like, oh, like I'm getting so much money back. Yeah, I'm gonna go buy some
it's
Christmas
your own
presents.
money, dummy.
Yeah,
It's your own money.
Insane. Yeah,
You're not
they
getting
really
somebody
made
else's. It's yours.
Yeah.
That always my goal anytime I would do my taxes was I never wanted to get a refund. But I never wanted to owe. Just I don't care. Just I don't want to owe anything. I don't break even. I'm good. I don't need a refund. Just take what you need and then leave me alone.
Yeah.
To me, taxes are just absolutely, utterly immoral. I think it's an absolute. First of all, it's a punishment on work. It's a punishment on entrepreneurship, because why am I going to work and pay all these taxes, and then there's 50% of 49% of the country doesn't pay taxes to begin with?
Yeah.
What's the incentive to work? Why not? Why? I'd just sit back and collect a check.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the beauty of socialism, right?
Yes.
It's like when everyone realizes they can live for free, then it's like everyone's going to start doing it, and then no one produces.
Eventually, you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, but yeah, no. So this is probably going to piss you off. So even in the tax code, like if your income is taxable, and let's just say like everything is the way you think the IRS says it is, even in the tax code, you don't owe any tax until you file at the end of the year. So basically what that means is they're withholding your money that you don't owe yet. And they tell you it's a crime if you file exempt, and they can penalize you for it. Because, like, wait, why should I be penalized for not paying a tax in advance that I don't have to pay? But that's how they see it. And this is actually a huge clue that this is actually an excise, and how they're able to get away with it. Because if this were any other tax, then, they wouldn't be able to do that. But because it's an excise on basically it's not exactly this, but I'll say this to simplify it. Receiving money from the government, is a privilege, which sure, that makes sense, right? They don't have to hire you. You don't have to get a job from them. That's a privilege. And with that privilege comes their ability to say, okay, but we're going to hold some aside so you can pay taxes later. But if you're not working for the government, you don't have to do that. Like there's no legal basis. There's no legal foundation for that. But it just seems like normal. Everyone does it.
It's I wish more people would understand this. I really do, because it would make such a profound difference in everybody's lives, first of all. And I think you would see more of a movement to abolish these things. I mean, I know the current administration, on the campaign trail was talking about, we're going to get rid of the IRS. We're going to, tariffs are going to replace everything, which, by the way, prior to the institution of the 16th Amendment, everything was paid for through tariffs. Everything.
It was a much smaller government, but yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I understand that. But if you look in comparison to in the world today, of course, the government is bigger, absolutely, but also the economies are bigger. The amount of trade that takes place is larger than it was back then. So you can still fund everything you need to fund through tariffs. You don't need to have an income tax. And I think more people need to come aware of that. Now, I was starting to say, is that I know the administration has promised that, through these tariffs, we're going to be able to, shut down the IRS and no more income tax and all this stuff. Okay, it's a year in.
1 second. They've only raised, I think they put out some official numbers, $200 billion from tariffs so far, which is, that's pretty much a whole year's worth at this point. And the income tax pulls in something like $4 trillion every year. So, less than 5% to replace that. But to your point, this is, and this is one of the things, one of the reasons why I'm out here, trying to share this information and even finding out ways to get the left on board with it. Because they're usually advocating for more taxes, even though some guys on the right, they like their programs too, right? But like you said, we can't just wait for politicians to change this. They're only going to do what we're willing to put up with, and if we're all willing to put up with it, why would they have any reason to get rid of it? But also, to the point, all these things that whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right, there's something that you hate about the government, and you're paying for it with these taxes, right? The left is oh, ICE is going around, detaining people, and they're blowing up fishing boats, and also, they're doing that with your money from the taxes that you keep saying we need to, to increase. It's like, socialism sounds like a great idea. You get to steal some money from some other people, and you give everybody free food and healthcare. That sounds great. But the people you're giving that money to are politicians, and they don't care about food and healthcare or shelter or anything like that. They care about blowing stuff up and,
spending your money.
Yeah.
Politicians don't care about you. They care about themselves.
Yeah.
And most of the money that comes in through these taxes get funneled through these NGOs. Like we found when Doge was doing USAID. We found out how much of your tax dollars were going into these ridiculous programs, Sesame Street in Afghanistan, and transgender surgeries for kids in some third world country in the middle of Africa someplace. And millions, in some cases billions of your dollars, your tax dollars, the money that you work for, funneled through these organizations. And the majority of the time, they weren't even getting to those locations. They were being funneled right through these NGOs, through USAID and organizations like that, and right back into the PACs, the PACs for the politicians. And so it's just a large money laundering scheme, and that's all your tax dollars. So when you say we need to stop this, start with your tax dollars.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To me, that just makes the most sense.
Yeah. And fortunately, there's, it's a great place where you can actually do this. I have my e-commerce store. I don't collect any sales tax on there. I don't pay any of these other taxes. I haven't paid any traffic tickets or parking tickets. And
I wanted to ask you about that. I saw that in your profile, but we kind of jumped ahead of that. That was,
yeah. I mean,
going to come back to that.
there's so many, and I know, like, I don't expect everyone to do all the things that I'm doing, but there are quite a few of them, especially the big ones that, like, if we at least started learning how it works, and how they're ripping us off, we could push back and stop. And I hear everything from, like, because I get it, like, everyone's afraid of the IRS, and there's also a lot of misinformation out there, and there are a lot of people who have tried and gone to prison for doing it wrong. And that was kind of the purpose of my whole study, was like to figure out where did they go wrong, and how can we actually beat this thing. And we're in a very fortunate position where we can, because you go to places like Mexico, or I'm actually in Mexico right now. And like, you look at like their tax system, like you don't really have a whole lot of rights. There is no legal way to get out of paying these taxes. And the government's fortunately small, so you can avoid a lot of taxes, but they're ruthless. Like, they're, if they say you got to pay us something, they'll just go straight in your bank account. There's no, there's not as much due process, and there's not this gaping legal loophole where you don't have to pay it at all. So we're in a very fortunate position in the United States where, like, that's the case. And so, I urge people to, if they're not going to try it, at least to learn about it and understand how it works. Because it's, I mean, like, that's our only leverage to make this stop.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it voluntarily.
Yeah. Hypothetically speaking, say for example, I hadn't filed my tax returns federal for 3-4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. Go through the whole process, get put into a non-collectible status. What would happen if, after being put into this non-collectible status, I said, I'm not filing anymore after this?
So they treat every year separately. So you could be on so non-collectible means some amount has been assessed, and then you just told them, hey, I don't have the means to pay you. And they say, okay, fine, we'll leave you alone. They can still calculate the next couple of years after that if they're still getting reports, but every year is treated separately. It's a separate account. It's a separate amount due. Unless you get a refund from one and you owe one from another, they'll roll it over. So if you say you're not going to file, then the thing is, if they get the information, they're still probably going to, even if you're on non-collectible, they might still, calculate it, and do all that. If you're having money withheld, they might still do that. I don't know if the currently not collectible times out after some time where it would affect other years. That's a path I haven't gone down yet. But what I would say is this, like, if you haven't filed, it's always the best thing to do is always to check with the IRS and get what's called a transcript, which basically has all the information they have about you and how much money you earned. And if there's nothing there, you don't have to file, and you never have to worry about it. Of course, assuming your income is not taxable, because if your income was taxable and you got it, the legal thing to do would be to report it and pay taxes on it. But assuming the money you received wasn't actually taxable, you don't have to do anything, because they don't have any information. They're not going to do a substitute file. They don't have any misinformation, I'll say. Now, if they've already assessed something, and this is my I have my this is my 2019 right here. This started out with, I didn't file, and they basically said, here's your assessment. These are all up on my X account, but here's your assessment. And they're like, yeah, you owe us like, 35 grand. And then like later it came up to like 60 grand or something like that. So I said, okay, well, that's wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file in response to that. And my filing showed that I owed zero. And there was a little bit of back and forth with them, but ultimately they said, okay, fine, you don't owe us anything. But since there was money withheld from that year, they returned it to me. So, a lot of people think like, yeah, there's some loophole where you can just not file and they'll leave you alone, but that's not quite it. This is an interesting way to look at it, right? Let's say you get pulled over while you're driving and you have a passenger in the car. The cop comes up to the window and says, do you know how fast you were going? Right. And you say, well, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. And the cop doesn't know, so he can't write it on the ticket. You can't get a ticket, right? Or, if he does give you a ticket and makes up a number, you can call him on and say, hey, how did you get that number? Where's the radar? Right.
Right.
But imagine your passenger goes, oh yeah, he was going 95, right?
Yes.
This is what your employer is doing when they send this information to the IRS. They're saying we gave him taxable money, which is in most cases is actually not true. But it's submitted as testimony under penalty of perjury. This is now considered fact unless somebody rebuts it and says that's not true, right? So
Okay.
if you're the driver and your friend just said, yeah, he was going 95, and you just say, hey, shut up, man. Well, that's going on the record, that's going into court, and you're going to be convicted. But if you say, no, he's lying, now you have a different story, right? So now you're going to get that to court, and it's, his word versus yours, which is much different. So and especially when we're talking about taxes, your friend in the car, like I saw the speedometer is 95. If you ask your employer to come in and testify, why did you say it was taxable, and ask them to explain the tax code, they're not going to have any. I don't know. My CPA just told me to do it. But you signed it under penalty of perjury yourself. You must have understood why this was taxable. I don't know. My CPA just said I had to do it. Right? Is that credible testimony?
Yeah. No. Then you could see how it would just spiral out of control from that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting is when people challenge it the way I've learned how to do it, I don't want to say this isn't a system I created on my own. Like, if anything, it's taking bits and pieces from a lot of people who have figured this out. When you challenge it this way, it never goes to court. Like, I went back and forth with them a few times where they were like, no, you got to pay us. And I said, like, no, they would say, oh, we got your return. We made some adjustments, and here's the number you owe. And I'm like, where are the adjustments? What adjustments did you make? And I would notice that those letters coming from the IRS were not signed by anybody. Who made those changes? Who made those adjustments?
Oh.
And they couldn't tell me. And so a little bit of back and forth, and eventually they're like, okay, fine, don't pay us. It's insane. Like, I know, like, if I were listening to somebody else saying this, I wouldn't believe it either. But, and that's why it's so important for me to post these receipts, because, like, it's mind blowing that's how simple it is.
But it also sounds, it's simple, but it sounds confusing too. Because there is a lot of work that has to go into this. This isn't just something you could just pull out of your hat. You have to actually read and prepare yourself for this, because you can easily get yourself in trouble. And I started laughing when you were given the cop analogy, because I worked in law enforcement. So I understand, I spent 20 years doing it. So,
Nice.
So I get the analogy. I will confess that I did use those trickeries to try to get somebody to say something.
Yeah. But, it really is fascinating. But we just have to understand, like, how many people, you're in law enforcement, how many people pled guilty to something because you were in law enforcement? How many people pled guilty just because they had no idea, like, what was going on,
and just didn't want to deal with the hassle of it?
Yeah. And, like, especially, like, you have these public defenders coming in for most cases, and they read through your file, and they make it sound like they actually read everything, but they're like, oh, you should plead guilty, this is bad, this looks bad. Right? And it's like, and they won't tell you they're usually getting paid, like, their check is being signed by the prosecutor in a lot of cases. Nobody knows any of this. You're just like, I don't know anything about what's going on here. So, like, to your point, like, yeah, it's a lot of reading and understanding, but it's like, if you don't do it, you get screwed. And I honestly, like, if I were to say I hated one thing the most about the world that we live in, it's that the system that's supposed to be there to protect us is actually screwing us over.
Yeah.
Unless we like educate ourselves.
It's a great point.
So much about it. And it's like, otherwise we just have to trust what's there. And there's nobody that has nobody has our back. Like, you talk to, like, you get wrongfully arrested for any crime. Your public defender doesn't have your back. You try to call a lawyer, most of them are going to throw you under the bus. Like, there are very few lawyers who, go in and do the Matlock thing and, like, therefore he's innocent, right? Like, very, very few lawyers who will do that. And if you can find one, you probably don't have enough money for it. That's probably one of the biggest tragedies about the world that we live in. So, yeah, but it's so it sucks, but, like, I'm trying to help bring this information out so that however we can make it happen, we got to figure out how we can get people some help to push back against this. Otherwise, we're going to keep going in the wrong direction.
Hold on one second. A little blurb here just popped up. All right, there we go. So apparently Instagram, after an hour, shuts you off. So yeah, so I did not know.
You
that.
sure it wasn't? Oh, you have that guy on.
No. Well, it could be. It could very well be, but I don't think so. First of all, I don't think we're talking about anything here that's seditious or
Right.
or conspiracy theory. This is stuff that's documented. It's factual. I mean, of course, you don't embark on something like this without doing your research first.
Right.
So for anybody watching, listening, thinking that this is, hey, I'm going to go out and do this, and just stumble your way through it. No, we're just bringing information to light. You need to do the research. You need to study this thing out before you start jumping on it. So, I guess we could do something like we could put something like this up there. Not financial advice.
Right. Yeah. Well, so what's interesting, something that I'm working on right now is on my website to create, one is to create tools where, for educational purpose only, you can put all your tax info in and it would give you the forms that I would fill if I were you. But it would also explain why.
I like that.
But then also like a community forum where basically we can get people who really understand this stuff to people can ask questions and we can answer them. What should I do if this happens? Right. Because there's always that edge case. You could write a whole book about this stuff and somebody's like, well, I did this and they sent me this letter and now I'm all confused and there's no answer in the book. What do I do? These examples, you need a community support for that. So I'm working on building something like that. There's, hopefully we'll get out of this.
I hope so. Well, and just to clarify this isn't that sovereign citizen stuff, right?
No.
Okay.
No. And then, like I mentioned before, it's difficult because as soon as I start talking about this stuff, there's a lot of misinformation out there, where people confuse me. I get that all the time. Is that sovereign citizen stuff? And there's actually, I have on my somewhere on my webpage, there's so the IRS has this list of what they call frivolous arguments, right? Which is it's like 80 different arguments that people have used for why they don't have to pay income tax. And a lot of them are the sovereign citizen things and, all kinds of stuff like that. I've actually gone through and responded to every single one and why it actually is supposedly a valid argument, or why the argument that they're saying is actually, even in my view, a terrible argument. And one of them, along with the sovereign citizens, they have this non-citizen national thing. Basically someone saying, I'm not a citizen and therefore the tax doesn't apply to me. But in the tax code, and the courts have said it too, citizenship doesn't matter. I mean, if you have a foreigner who comes to the United States and they get a job, they're paying taxes, right? It doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. Right. What matters is where the money's coming from. And so, to say you're not a citizen doesn't really get you anywhere. There's a lot of bogus information out there. And that's probably why I spend so much time researching all these other cases, reading about, all these other people who have, if they've either beat the case, beat the IRS for a while and then somehow, found out, the IRS targeted them and took them down, how exactly they were able to do that. And a lot of them use that, citizenship argument, which is totally bogus. A lot of them, they like to show off how smart they are too. And so they'll say oh, this and this. And it's you were in law enforcement, when somebody starts running their mouth, they're going to talk their way out of a ticket, there's nothing you can say, right? The best thing to do is just shut up and let the other side prove their case. Exactly. And that's really the best way to deal with the IRS, because at the end of the day, all we're saying is the report that came in that said my income was taxable is wrong. So you have to throw it out, unless you can have someone come in and testify and articulate exactly how that income was, or that transaction was taxable income. And that's something they're not going to be willing to do. So it's best not to say why you don't have to pay the tax. Just shut up and say, you've got the burden of proof. Tell me why. Tell me why I should have to pay tax on that.
So what do you think the biggest lie Americans believe about taxes or the IRS enforcement?
Oh man. I would say this: if you don't file, you're going to go to jail. That's
the biggest lie.
I think the biggest fear for a lot of people when the reality is most of these people who say this, first of all, when you file, you're going to get a refund. They don't care about you.
Right.
Right?
True.
The number of people they prosecute every year is something like 2,000 people. So you have better chances of getting struck by lightning. But those people they prosecute are people who say, you know, they've got 20 dependents and they write off, you know, $1 million in business expenses that never existed. This is how you get the IRS, you know, to charge you, which is basically fraud, right? And you know, like, you know, part of me says, hey, you know what, you tried to not pay the tax. You have my full support, but at the same time, it's fraud. So I can see how they were able to pin that on you, right? But yeah, simply not filing is they can technically charge you, but they're usually not going to. Usually what they'll do is they're just going to file the substitute for you and send you a bill and try to collect it, whether they take it out of your bank account, put liens on your property, or whatever else they're going to do. But it's usually like, you know, the courts are crowded. They have to use the federal courts. There aren't a whole lot of them. Like, you compare how many federal courts there are to like how many county, you know, state courts. There's like thousands of those, right? There's only a handful of federal courts where they can actually try these cases. And of course, most people plead guilty anyways. But yeah, it's not worth it to them, you know, to go after somebody that they would owe money to anyways if they did file, you know, to charge these people. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones there.
So we spent an hour just shooting the breeze here. Didn't really talk about anything significant, I know, but you know what we never got to? We didn't get to your book.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book for a little bit.
Okay, so I've actually got two of them. I just published my second one. So the first one is Taxation Is Theft: How Politicians Rob You Blind. Mm-hmm. This talks about like this is the thicker one. It talks about a lot of really interesting things about taxes most of us don't understand. The history of taxes. Most people don't know that the tomato is a fruit and not a vegetable, but we kind of call it a vegetable because there was an import tax, and they were like, there's a lot of tomatoes coming in, we have to tax those. We'll call it a vegetable and tax it. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. It's called Nix v. Hedden. And the Supreme Court said, okay, yeah, for the purpose of that tax, it's a vegetable.
I never knew that. That's like, I know that there's an old little saying that they say, you know, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. That I know, you know, but I never knew that it had a tax base to it.
Yeah, it's insane. There's so much of this stuff does. So I talk about, and then there's like, you know, stories of like ordinary guys who, there was Nevada tried to impose an exit tax. They would charge trains a tax on every person. This was like in the early 1900s. Every person leaving the state of Nevada had to pay an extra tax, and the train stations were supposed to collect it. But then there was this conductor who was like, you know, standing up on principle, I'm not going to do it. And he went, you know, they arrested him and everything, went all the way to the Supreme Court for them to rule that tax was unconstitutional. So like sometimes, you know, some little nobody, you know, working, you know, the bottom tier job at a big company is the person who has to put their life on the line to say like, you know, we're not gonna stand for this. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And then this one I just published is called Crash the Fed. Basically this one is if you're the smaller book, if you're a Ron Paul fan, if you know anything about The Creature from Jekyll Island, you definitely want to read this. But basically the idea is that I can count on one hand the number of politicians who have ever supported auditing the Fed, much less ending it. And one of those people was Bernie Sanders, believe it or not.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
It's not going to happen. We're not like, politicians do not have the incentive to get rid of the Federal Reserve. We have to get rid of it. And so the idea behind Crash the Fed is that there are things that we can do. And this goes back to like, you know, me learning about how to get out of bank debt and tickets and like all this other stuff, and like understand there are actions that I can take to break these massive systems that have like tremendous amounts of power that they can wield over us, but we still have the power to break them. And so Crash the Fed basically says, like, let's do that. We're done waiting for politicians. It's not going to happen. We have the incentive to end the Fed. Let's end it. Let's crash it.
Now, you also said that inflation is not accidental.
Yeah.
You say that it's engineered. So
yeah, the entire purpose of inflation is, okay, so everybody talks about like passive income, right? It's easy income. You buy a house and you rent it out, and people just send you checks every month, right? So banks do this on a much bigger scale with credit cards and 30-year, 50-year mortgages, right? The entire concept is creating passive income where we all become slaves and we just keep sending them money every month. So the Federal Reserve has basically done this exact same thing to the federal government. So people like to say that the Federal Reserve or the government prints money out of thin air. That's not exactly how it works. They borrow it out of thin air, which is much worse. Because if you look at, so the federal government prints bonds, they give the bonds to the Fed gives them bills in exchange. So let's just pick a number, $1 billion. They print $1 billion in bonds, and then there's $1 billion in notes that come in return. But now the Fed is going to charge interest, right? Mm-hmm. So these bonds, right? These bonds pay interest. And so when the Fed says, okay, it's time for me to cash out these bonds, you don't owe me $1 billion. You owe me $1.1 billion. But there's only $1 billion in existence. Where are you going to get the other 100 million, right? And so the only way for them to do that is to borrow more from the Fed, and it creates a cycle, which, they have to keep borrowing, which means they have to keep inflating, which is fine for them, because what that does is that creates a constant flow of cash from the government to the Federal Reserve. And if you look at the growth of the Federal Reserve since it created, like the amount of assets that they're sitting on compared to GDP has exploded from like a fraction of percent to like half of the GDP. Like that's how much they're sitting on in government debt. And it's all about control, because now they control, oh, you want to pass a law that does something like this? Well, you need our money to do that, or you're not going to be able to pass a budget. And so we're going to tell you what's going to be in those bills. And they, lobby groups, money laundering, like you were talking about, all this other stuff. But the entire system was designed for a bank to control a subject. And in this case, the subject is the entire government, which is absolutely horrible. But if the government realized, like, hey, we can just default on the debt and not pay them back, and there's nothing they can really do about it. And if the American people would wake up to that and push their politicians to do that, then it's like there's a way out. But people are afraid of that. They think it's gonna, is gonna collapse their retirement funds, which it will, but not if you get your retirement funds out of treasury bonds first, right? Yeah, so there's all kinds of information in this book about like how you create a peaceful transition so that we're not faced with like collapse and chaos and everything else. Like there is a peaceful way to do this, which hopefully we can do.
But who benefits from all this though?
It's large corporations, it's bankers. I mean, you look at some people are just like, they're sociopaths. They like having control over other people, right? You see this, like, even not like wealthy trillionaires who control people, but you see this even like at the small scale, like when you see some of these like serial killers, doing this weird manipulative stuff. Like there are sociopaths out there. Like we like to think that like there aren't super evil people in this world, but there are. And some people, like, it's all about control. Money is control, debt is control, and all this other stuff. So, I don't want to name names exactly. I probably don't even know who most of them are, but you can find a lot of these people at like the heads of these massive corporations, the ones that are like always in the same circle, that are always trying to control people, like, whether it's imposing their will on foreign countries, especially underdeveloped countries, and like trying to say like, oh, we're helping them, and then they're just like trying to manipulate the hell out of their policies and everything. There's a lot of like really sick stuff going on out there, and they're able to do this through by controlling the governments, because those are ultimately the people with the monopoly on the use of force, right? Who's going to come after you and put you in prison if you control the only people who could do that?
That's right.
It's it's a complicated system.
It is, and I think it's done that way intentionally.
Yeah, definitely.
It discourages people from looking into it and seeing what's really going on behind the closed doors.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, one thing we didn't mention earlier is that you ran for president.
I did.
You did.
This is my presidential hat over here. Actually, this is so. I ran. I ran with the Libertarian Party, and it was kind of it was kind of a joke at first, because I like when I got involved in politics, I was looking for a party that would stand on the ground of taxation is theft, and we got to do something, right?
Yeah.
And I got to the Libertarians, and I was like, these guys have like all these really great philosophies about all kinds of stuff, but they're not really taking this tax thing seriously. And so I was like, I'm going to make taxation as theft great again in order, so to speak. And so I was just like, I was like, the biggest, most obnoxious display of taxation is theft at their convention. But it was, I tried to run a serious campaign as much as I could, knowing, the chances are slim to none. But we did some really awesome stuff. If you look at the FEC reports for 2020, I'm listed as number 8, outraising Kamala Harris and Andrew Yang, because I basically wrote myself an IOU of $50 million and then included in the FEC report, which is exactly how the Federal Reserve works. And what's funny is a lot of these people who were against the Fed were coming at me like, "Oh, that's fraud." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to prove a point here, guys."
Yeah, because I was actually going to ask you about that because it says that you printed your own money, so I'm assuming that's what the IOU was for, and that's stunt. But doing that, even though it was a stunt, it did expose something about campaign finance and money itself. Correct?
Yeah, so a few people have been asking me to run for governor of Texas, and I've I haven't, I really don't want to, but like I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, how would I do it if I did this? And, from what I understand now about campaign finance and everything is, well, first of all, I wouldn't create a campaign finance committee, which means I wouldn't have to disclose any of my donors. I'd call it a 501c3 and say, I'm just on this, this tour to preach the good word that taxation is theft. And now it's a 501c3 tax deductible organization that specializes in education, even though, it's called, Dan for governor of Texas. And, would they do anything? Probably not. Because realistically, it's like, it technically follows all their rules. Like, I'm like, this is just kind of like how I think. Now, at the same time, most people would be like, oh, we're not going to touch that campaign because the FBI is going to, someone's going to prison over that. And it's like, people are so afraid of laws that don't even exist, or like laws that they don't understand. They're like, that doesn't sound right. Nobody else does it. Therefore, someone's going to prison if someone does it. And it's like, that's not how it works, guys. You want me to get a permission slip from the government that says it's legal? Because they're not going to do that when, they want to have tabs on knowing exactly where all the money's coming from. But yeah, it's like campaign finance. Like, I don't know how many campaigns I've donated to in the past. And like, whenever they ask for your employer and occupation, I say employer is Russia, occupation is asset. And like, that's got to be in there in like a dozen FEC reports. And it's like, they've never reached out to me or anyone that I've donated to saying, why are you taking foreign money? So, and of course it's small amounts, and it's, maybe if I donated $100 million, they'd say something, but like it's oh, that was the other thing with the campaign finance. You have limits on how much someone can donate. But if it's a free speech campaign, I can take $100 million from a single person. So, without a PAC or any of that stuff. So yeah, it's insane how silly the whole thing is. But, I guess everyone kind of thinks like, oh, we have rules for that, so we're safe. We know there's no fraud going on because there's checks and balances in place. But it's like, they're not checking and balancing anything, really.
No, not really. Not at all. So yeah. when everyday people turn around and say things like the economy feels rigged, do you think they're right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's it's really like it's complicated. So it's difficult for everyone to understand. But I mean, like, we could talk about the FHA, right? Everyone thinks the FHA is there to help people and make housing more affordable, but all it's done is put people into debt. Like before the FHA, people were getting 15-year loans on their houses, and they'd do a 50% down payment, which was like a year's worth of salary, and they'd have their house paid off in like 10 or 15 years. Then they were like, oh, we'll make it more affordable. We'll stretch that out over 30 years. Now they're talking about 50 years, and it's like,
which is ridiculous.
You look at how much more is going to a bank when you stretch it out like that, like how much more you're paying in interest. It's insane. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they say, oh, your payments are going to go down, but they're not. Because when you go to the bank, the first thing they do is say, what's your income? What can you afford on a payment? And then they work backwards. So, if you could afford $1,500 before on a 15-year loan, you can afford $1,500 on a 50-year loan. And they'll tell you, oh, instead of, with a 15-year loan, you could borrow, $50,000, you can borrow $400,000, right? So now everyone on the block has $400,000 that they can access. So the same house that used to cost $50,000, everyone's bidding it up to 400 because everyone has the same, right? So like they tell us, and like a lot of people believe this system was put there in place for that. But anyways, but my point is that like it's all complicated, and you can't look at it and be like it's not obvious. Like you can look at the numbers and be like, yeah, a shorter loan would be better, but I could never afford a 50% down payment. Well, yeah, but you could if the loans were, but like you have to work the whole thing backwards in time, and it's too complex for most people to understand it or to even want to sit down and try to understand it, especially knowing you can't do anything about it, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so you know, it like it is rigged absolutely on every single level. But like understanding it, and like there's a million agencies, not a million, I'm exaggerating, but like there's a lot of agencies, thousands probably. And they're all doing the same thing. They're all rigging something.
Right.
And so it's like, which one you want to go after today? Divide and conquer, right? They've got like 100 of us fighting the IRS, 100 of us fighting the property tax assessment office, another 100 fighting child services. These people they get bonuses for every child they take away from a family. Like all this stuff is like, it's rigged. Maybe some of it's done with good intentions, but like the outcomes are always disastrous. And we gotta do something about it. We're going in a really bad direction.
I think I read someplace talking about the 50-year mortgage that they're trying to float around right now. That the most savings you're going to get about $300.
Well, yeah, but like I said, you're probably not going to save it. Like what's going to end up happening is the housing is just going to the prices are going to inflate by like, it doesn't have to inflate much, but like by another 10-20%. And
then
you
that creates a
end up paying
bubble.
the same.
And that creates a bubble, and then the bubble's going to break one day, and we'll go back to what it was under George Bush.
Yeah,
when that whole bubble collapsed.
Exactly. It's although the interesting thing with that one, there were some winners on that because there was so much paperwork floating around that they actually lost a lot of it, and some people were able to keep their houses because the banks couldn't prove that they were now the legal holder of that debt. So, but there were a lot of people who tried to fight that. Some people won, some lost. But yeah, that's not going to happen this time because they've learned from that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like there's always all this stuff going on, and you have these. I mean, we talk like you hear it from both sides, right? These massive evil organizations that are trying to like rip us all off somehow, right? Whether it's Walmart with how they treat their employees, or whether it's some corporation that's like that's just extracting resources from other countries, or with like trying to take all of our guns away, like issues from both the left and the right. They're trying to do all this stuff to us, and it's like when are we going to put our foot down and like realize that this is the problem. They've done the whole divide and conquer, right? Because one side says, look, all of the Walmart employees are going to be treated better as long as we can get the guns taken away. Like that's kind of the logic they have, right? And then the right is like they're making the same kind of things, right? Well, as long as we don't have socialism, we can keep our guns. And it's like they're taught to hate each other. And actually, one of the things I talk about in Crash the Fed is that like, no, actually, we're both on the same side. And if we tell people, you know what, take as much money as possible as you can from the government and just support me in not paying taxes, then we can actually, hold hands and take this thing down together, and things will get a lot better for all of us. Including, and we're talking about like debt forgiveness for college debt, and also like both sides can get what they want if we get rid of the Fed and if we collapse it this way. That's kind of the beautiful thing about this.
Well, I agree with you. The Fed has to go. I mean, that's the closest thing we have to a central bank in this country, if you want to term it that way. And that's something that our founding generation never envisioned for this country either. It was tried. Alexander Hamilton was very, very in favor of something like that. I think, if I remember correctly, I'm scratching my head here now. I think Alexander Hamilton believed that the more debt that a country had, the better off they were financially. They had more power, more. I don't remember exactly how it was, but that just makes no sense. It makes no sense. First of all, there's despite what the Fed says, there's a limited supply of money. You could tax every millionaire, billionaire in this country, and you're not going to have enough to pay back the federal debt.
Right.
there's really it's untenable. Something has to give. Something. I think that we're heading toward another financial crash, and I think it's going to be a big one.
I don't know if we are or not. Well, let me say this. Because like it depends on what we, the people, do, right? Because so the Fed is going to crash, right? It's like you said, it's untenable, but at the same time, they have a way of, like, they know hyperinflation is bad, right? So they try to like kick the can slowly down the road as slow as they can.
Sure.
But once it hits that inevitable system, that inevitable, once it crosses that line, then it's like it's downward spiral. And so once that happens, like, yes, people are going to lose all their savings, which you could call a financial crisis. But that's only because these people have their savings in either dollars or, like, most people, even if you have $1 million saved, you don't have a checking account with $1 million. You have investments, right?
Right.
If a lot of those investments are in treasury bonds, then yeah, you're going to lose. And I know so many people who are, they're in the Fed people, but they have their retirement fund in treasury bonds. Don't do that. Because like when the Fed crashes or gets ended, however you want to put it, that money is gone. It's sitting on promises that are backed by other promises that, the entire system is going to be gone.
Sure.
Get rid of that. Get anything else you can: gold, crypto, even stocks in companies or bonds in other, projects that aren't backed by dollars. Right. So there's ways out of it. And if we do that, there's not going to be a huge collapse. The dollar is going to collapse, but it's not going to hurt any of us because we're already prepared for it. I guess that's the important thing. But what's interesting about this is if we all have trust and faith in the dollar, like, sure, we could keep propping it up. Like that's the thing, right? As long as we pay our taxes, every time we pay our taxes, it actually slows down inflation, right? Because whatever we don't pay in taxes, they're just going to print. So if we pay more in taxes, they print less, which keeps their little scam going. But if we all say we're going to stop paying taxes, plus we're going to all start taking more and more and more from the government, you're going to have to start printing more. And, we're going to play the hot potato game with these dollars and just get rid of them as fast as we can. Then, the Federal Reserve becomes obsolete and it's gone. And as long as we don't have people who are like sitting onto these dollars thinking they're, hopefully nobody today is holding on to dollars thinking like inflation is over with, these are going to be valuable one day. Then nobody's really going to be hit too hard.
So what do you think about investing in precious metals like gold, silver, and things like that, as opposed to
that stuff?
I think it's a great idea. I recently started purchasing some silver. I can't afford gold right now, but silver, I think today was like $64 an ounce.
In the book, I wrote about how it's gonna pass 40 someday, and then as I'm editing the book, I'm like, oh shit, it already passed 40. So there's a note in there that says, since I wrote this line, it's already past 40, and now it's at like 60 something. Yeah, it's crazy. I definitely love silver. A lot of people think silver is going to catch up with gold. Like gold has already been way ahead, and silver's got a lot of catching up to do. I don't know whether or not that's true, but at the end of the day, an ounce of silver is worth an ounce of silver. Every government around the world knows, like, as many times as they take, the gold backing off their currency or the exchanges for their currency, they all still value gold and silver. So, they're timeless. I know there's kind of a war going on between crypto and metals. I think they're both great. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But yeah, I collect a bunch of silver. And there's all kinds of like smart things. Like once you start doing this, you start learning more about it. Where do you put it? How do you keep it safe? How do you know, you're not buying fake coins or fake bars or anything like that? Like there's a lot of considerations to learn about, but it's definitely worth doing, because otherwise you're just trusting the banks, and these are the same banks that are ripping you off.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to actually ask you about cryptocurrencies, because I hold some crypto. I don't have a lot right now. I had an unexpected situation pop up. I had to take some money out of the cryptos because I needed it right away. So I have some cryptos. Like I said, I just recently started purchasing silver, and I don't like to get the coins, to be honest. I like getting the little ounce bars. It's just my preference on it. But but you know, I feel better holding that than, you know, the physical metal in my hand than the cryptos, though, because I've been seeing the crypto, you know, it goes up, and it's like a roller coaster ride, especially lately. It's been a lot of dips lately, especially in some of the stuff that I'm holding. That it kind of worries me a lot when I see that. You know, we're investing money in this stuff, and you know, I'm losing. You know, when do you stop? You know, or when do you pull out of it and just say, okay, you know, it's enough, or do you just stop investing in it?
Right.
I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. You know, I'm still hopeful that what I'm holding is going to do better, and you know, I'll buy a little bit here, a little bit there, but I'm not investing as much as I had been.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's you know, that's why I say don't stick all your eggs in one basket. But so crypto's a funny thing. I really only think there's 1,000 different coins out there. I think only a couple of them are actually worth anything. Bitcoin, you've got, you know, these massive institutions that have been buying tons of it. So, you know, I would say definitely hold on to that. I have some Bitcoin. I guess so you want to throw up the not financial advice disclaimer. But Monero is another interesting one. And so there's a couple different ways to look at it. One is that these weren't really designed as savings accounts, even though a lot of people kind of treat them that way. They were designed to be transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Monero, I really like because it is privacy based. I mean, like if you send someone, if you pay someone in Bitcoin, depending on the wallet you use and how you do it, they could know exactly how much Bitcoin you have in your account and, you know, where you got it from. There's a lot of, and of course the government's using all kinds of tracking information. They could possibly, you know, flag certain Bitcoins as, you know, these Bitcoins were used in a drug transaction a long time ago and going to be valued less. That's, you know, that's at least what some people are worried about. But at the same time, Bitcoin is the most, you know, available one. It's the one that, you know, all the big governments are talking about and using. Monero is the one that all the governments want to ban. So that kind of makes it very enticing for me. And the reason for that is it's all privacy based. So you can't see the history on any of that. And I know there's a few other coins that make the same claims, but Monero, I think, has like a more stable community. They've been around for a pretty long time, and they're not as volatile, I would say, in the pricing. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, at the end of the day, it's just like gold, right? Like gold has some pretty big swings to it. Not as big as Bitcoin, of course. But at the end of the day, an ounce of gold is always an ounce of gold, and one Bitcoin is always one Bitcoin.
Right. But the one you're mentioning, Monero, I'm gonna have to look into that one. See, we have a resident crypto psychic on our show. She comes on every other Saturday. We do a show together, and we talk about the latest trends in cryptos and such. And she's pretty good with her prognostications. So
awesome.
I'm gonna roll this one by her and see what she thinks about it.
Awesome.
Her opinion on it.
I'll have to see in
actually, you know what? Maybe one Saturday, if you're free, you come on the show with us.
All right.
And we'll talk some crypto stuff. We'll have a little panel discussion here. That might be interesting. It'd be a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
All right. Well, listen, I'm looking at the clock here. We got to start wrapping this thing up. So, who is someone that you respect right now, and what are they doing that inspires you?
Oh man. Well, I got to start with the person sitting right in front of me. I respect what you're doing. Absolutely. Especially having someone as crazy as me on, making these, you know, extraordinary claims.
Listen, I have an affiliate with the Alex Jones store, so don't worry about it.
Nice. Yeah, I've run into Alex a few times. Actually, I have this clip of him. I have a lot of respect for him, actually. So the first time that I saw a video of him was, I think it was right after Texas instituted this thing where they were going to take your fingerprints when you renew your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this, it looked like it was recorded on like a VHS.
It probably was.
Yeah. And he's getting thrown out of the DMV, and he's like, I want you to renew my license, but I'm not going to give you my fingerprint. And that was my introduction to Alex, and it's really interesting. But yeah, there was one time we were at this protest in Virginia, and it was like all the gun owners showed up, and he's walking down the street, and I just, you know, he's taking an interview, and I was like, nice. I was like, my only opportunity. I really don't want to be rude, but it's my only opportunity. Hey, Alex, is taxation theft? And he says, and he says, taxation without representation is theft. And I wasn't really happy with that answer for like several reasons, but I said, what about taxation without consent? And he said, yes, absolutely. And I was like, all right, cool. Thumbs up. So for those who don't know,
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So everyone says, taxation isn't theft. Taxation without representation is theft. They say that's what started the American Revolution, which there is some truth to that. But by the time they were done fighting and they signed, or by the time they were getting ready to start fighting and they signed the Declaration of Independence, they said, because the king has taxed us without our consent, not without representation. They were done with that at that point. They said without consent.
Right, yeah.
So that's an interesting story there. But yeah,
that's a great point too. That probably a lot of people never picked up on. It was without their consent, which is, and mind you, just point of information here. Our country was founded because of a tax increase of 3% on
au contraire
on tea.
It was actually, this is where everybody gets that story wrong. It was actually a decrease in the tax, but it came with protectionism that said you can only buy your tea from the British, because they were already like, yeah, we're not going to pay your 3% tax. We're going to buy it from like all these other companies, like I think like Ireland and some other places, and they had to start smuggling it. But they were passing this Tea Act, which was actually gonna, I don't know if it was a Tea Act, but that's when the war really broke out, was when they were passing this act that said they were going to reduce it. I think it was from 4% to 3%. So the 3% is still in there somewhere. But it was the monopoly that really pissed everyone off. But again, this is like one of those stories that like through propaganda and like who's telling the truth and who gets to publish like who won the war and all that kind of stuff. The winner gets to write history.
That's right.
Yeah. There's
That's right. My simple point was this: is that they revolted over a 3% tax on tea. What do you think our founding generation would be doing if they were around right now, seeing what we've done with this beautiful experiment that they left for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's insane.
It is, absolutely is. And it's also,
they'd be like, you're all slaves. What happened?
Yeah. Look what you did with what we gave you. I mean, just, I don't know. My thing is, I personally, and I said this to you before, is like, I don't want the government doing anything for me except protecting my right to do for myself. That's all I want. I don't need them for anything else. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I don't need any of their social, parachutes, whatever they call them. I forget. But, the one thing I do say is this, is that taxation it's immoral. It's taking, it's social. It's that socialistic attitude of, from each according to his abilities to each according to their needs. Doesn't work. You got 49% of the country doesn't pay any taxes. You and I pay taxes every time we get a paycheck. And then they tell us it's not enough when we submit that paper that they ask us to show, that prove to us that you've only made that amount of money, and then maybe we'll take something less or something more from you. Since my kids have gone on and moved on their own and all that stuff, and you lose that tax exemption for them, and you lose tax exemption for all this other stuff. Even though I am at zero exemptions on my or withholdings on my paychecks, every year they still tell me, oh no, you still owe. Well, how do I still owe you money? You're taking out the maximum you can take out. What do I still owe you? I don't have any other source of income.
Yeah.
It's just abuse, and it's abuse, and it's abuse. After a while, I think people are getting tired of not getting tired. I think people are tired of it now. And that's why when President Trump was running on, we're going to end the IRS and we're going to get rid of income taxes, that of course, helped propel him back to the White House. And I think people are starting to realize, hey, you know what? We got lied to.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
I think the great thing is, though, you pointed this out before, like it's like I do believe that change doesn't happen. There's a guy who wrote a great book a over 150 years ago, I think, called The Crowd, a study of the popular mind, I think. And the way I was, I'm reading this, maybe a year ago and realizing it's like everything he's saying is still true today, that the people have to want something. And until they all want it, like the politicians, the government, they're not going to give it to us. Like they're not going to say, this is what the people need, let's give it to them. It's not until we all say this is what we want and demand it. But if we're divided over, oh, we want this and the other group wants something else and the other group wants something else, then it's like they don't have to give anyone anything, because who's going to be mad about it? Just that one little group. And we're not going to form one big angry mob that's going to march on the Capitol with pitchforks and say, get the hell out of here, you guys. It really has to come from a public consensus of saying, this is what we want, give it to us, or you guys are out.
Yeah. And you talk about other things too regarding taxes, like property taxes and things like that. And that's another immoral thing, property taxes, because you don't own your property. Because if you don't pay your property taxes, and this is Texas, in the last session, they were trying to get property taxes removed, done, no more property taxes. It never happened, because it's a cash cow.
Yeah.
It's a cash cow, and they're not going to starve themselves. The beast will never starve itself.
There was I was just reading this interesting book. This guy, he tried to fight the tax system, and I've run into so many people that have tried to fight property tax, and in the end, unfortunately, they always fail. But he brought up some really interesting points, which is, and this was in Texas, that the assessors or something about like the people actually doing the assessment are not elected, and it kind of breaks the whole form of, we're supposed to be able to replace our all of the people who are telling us how to live our lives. We're supposed to be able to replace them by voting. And if they're appointed and not elected, then that takes away our ability to do that.
Great point in the chat. If government can take it, then we don't own it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oop. I don't know why my camera just shut off.
It's the government.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, it's that it's funny because a lot of people on the left complain about housing and all this other stuff, and they don't realize that when you're renting, you're paying your landlord's property tax, and like that makes rent more expensive. It makes it harder to buy a house. All these taxes, everything that everyone on the left complains about, not being able to afford things and being oppressed and everything else, most of it's done through taxes, and they think we need more of them. And that's like the craziest kind of paradox.
Yeah.
On the left.
It is. Like, for just as an example, another issue that I'm having here with property taxes, like here in Eagle Pass, the school district tax is the highest tax I have. So you have property tax, school district tax, and you have all these different taxes that are all combined. And I just got back in November, I got a letter from my my mortgage company saying, well, hey, there's a $3,000 shortage in your escrow because the school district tax. So we're increasing your mortgage payment by $400. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I don't even have kids that go to school. What the hell? Right. Oh yeah, there you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I battery issue with the camera. The light's still not back on, but
that's all right.
It's I mean, that's the thing, right? They never have to balance the budget. They never have to make the numbers add up, because worst case, what, they're going to take on some debt, and what's going to happen? The government's going to shut down. They always threaten us with that, but
look, it shut down. It shut down for what, 2 months? The federal,
and nobody knew it was missing.
And look at that. Life went on. Life went on, my friends. Yeah. Life went on. You don't.
But and this brings up an interesting issue with from my tech world, I guess we call it the single point of failure, where so you're telling me if government shuts down, we lose airports, we lose transportation, we lose imports and export, we lose everything, right? Because the government's in everything. Mm-hmm. When realistically, it's like, wait a minute, so the planes were still flying because those were all run by private companies. if you were to buy a ticket during a shutdown, you're still paying the 9/11 tax, which is supposed to pay for TSA.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still paying it. We're still paying TSA during the shutdown, but the money goes to the Treasury, and the Treasury refuses to pay the TSA agents. So those guys are sitting there working for free when it's like the money's still flowing, the business is still open, but it's going through the single point of failure. And so they use that, with something like 22 shutdowns in the last like 50 years. Like they do this all the time. Oh, we're going to shut down the government if you guys don't pass the budget. And then everyone freaks out because they're watching the news and they're like, oh my God, the government's going away. Like
please go away.
Yeah, right.
Please leave.
It's insane, but they use that to manipulate us. It's absolutely crazy. We saw the same thing. I don't know if you saw the Epstein stuff today.
I heard about it. Yeah, that was at my regular job, so I wasn't able to get into it too much.
Yeah, so it's like, so they redacted like pages. Like there's a PDF that's like literally every single page is just a big black box. That's it.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
And then BBC published, oh, the Department of Justice released all the Epstein files today. And so there are people who, because like not everyone listens to podcasts like this. This is just, this is our small group here. So most of the quote unquote normies will have read that BBC article and say, oh, finally, this whole thing is over. And then they're like, well, I never heard any crazy names or anything. So I guess there was nobody important on those lists. They think it's done.
If it's all redacted, that's why.
Yeah, but like the propaganda arm says it's done. Oh, everything has been released, and that's what they see, and that's what they believe. And if you have any normie friends and you ask them about this stuff, try not to inform them. Just ask them. Just ask a bunch of questions one time and see how much they know, and like it will blow your mind. And just realize it's because they're maybe they're not into conspiracy theories or keeping tabs on the government like they keep on us. They're just, they hear a little bit of news and realize that represents most of the country.
Yeah.
And that's really scary.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, Dan. So where can we go to find more about you and your work, sir?
So taxationistheft.info is where I have everything about the book. I've got a cool little merch store on there. I've got both books on there, actually. And that's where, if you join the mailing list, you'll get updates about, all the stuff I'm working on as far as, pre-filling tax forms and the community that I'm building, and a bunch of other cool stuff. That's really the first place to go. The other one, danforfreedom.com. That's just a little bit more about me, kind of my political side overview. Not a whole lot there.
I was cruising around the website today. It's
yeah,
cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's got a cool little story on it about me. But yeah, taxationistheft.info that's where all the magic happens.
Outstanding. So if you want to just hang out backstage for a minute or two, that's going to close this thing out. I'll just touch base with you before we go. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Dan, Taxation Is Theft, Berman. Oh, which by the way, we didn't mention it earlier, folks, but he changed his middle name to Taxation Is Theft. So by proclamation. So
exactly. Yeah.
There you go. All right, Dan. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. And I'll catch up with you and just give me like 5 minutes. Let me wrap this thing
good.
up. All right, bud. All right, folks. Dan Berman, make sure you check out his stuff. Really, really important. Really, really important. I'm looking forward to reading the books because, taxes are just ridiculous. It just, when you really sit down and think about what your money that you work so hard for is going to, and how they're getting your money, which is probably illegal in more ways than you can probably count. It should really, really hurt you. It should really upset you. It should really get you infuriated and angry. You should reach out to your local elected representatives and let them know how unhappy you are about this. It needs to stop. Taxation is theft. Taxation is immoral. And it needs to stop. All right. With that said, folks, don't forget, head over to our website, joerooz.com. When you get there, open up that little form there. You're going to see get yourself on the mailing list. It's free. Means it don't cost you nothing. All right. One of the few things in life that doesn't cost you anything. It's free. Get yourself on the list. And then take a visit over to Podmatch. All right. Podmatch. This show is part of the Podmatch podcasting network. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, just head over to Podmatch. Check out our profile at podmatch.com/member/Joe and take a look at it. And if you are looking to be a guest on a show, or if you are, maybe a host, you're looking to try things out, you can DM me through PM. DM through PM. I'm all fouled up here with my wire. So it's pulling my head down. Hold on. There we go. So DM, live show stuff. There we go. All right. DM through PM. That's the best way to get us if you want to go through Podmatch. We would love for you to go through Podmatch. It's a great platform to be a part of. And they have some great, look, like I said, we met Dan through Podmatch. Done 63 interviews with folks from Podmatch over the last year. And each one of them I've learned something from. Each one of them I take something from. And it's just a great platform. So check it out. Podmatch.com/member/Joe. And take a look at our show's profile. And if you do decide to join, make sure you use our link, joinpodmatch.com/Joe Rooz, and get yourself an account. Great platform to be a part of. If you're a host or someone who's a guest, check them out. They serve both. All right. Don't forget also to take a visit to thealexjonesstore.com/Joe. thealexjonesstore.com/Joe. Get yourself some of these great vitamins and supplements that are available on that website. I use that stuff. I take the Shilajit. I take the ultramethylene blue. I take the Irish sea moss, the turmeric. I take all that stuff. If I wasn't taking it, I wouldn't recommend it to you. It's good. Really good. You're going to love it. And just before you take the methylene blue, just please check with your doctor first. Very important, because if you are taking anything like SSRIs or anything like that, it can have an adverse reaction to it. So please check them out. thealexjonesstore.com/Joe. thealexjonesstore.com/Joe. And remember, 10% of everything that you purchase on there comes right back here to the show to help us keep this whole thing going. All right. Tomorrow, no show tomorrow. Don't forget to check out Sunday's show. The Sunday Bible study continues. We're still studying the law, and we're excited about that. We're going to start wrapping that up very, very soon. I think we have 2 more shows with that one. All right. Also, if you want to check us out on our socials, Twix, Joe Rooz, Truth Social, Joe Rooz, Minds, Joe Rooz, Facebook, Joe Rooz Show, Instagram, not Joe Rooz, TikTok is Joe.Rooz, and Getter is Joe Rooz there as well. All right, shout-outs, of course, to our producing team, executive producers Wayne Rankin, Rosanna Rankin, Carolina Jimenez, Marissa Lee, and Anonymous Angela. Thank you to John Seeley for the $30 donation. Thank you. Really do appreciate that. And if you want to help us out with joining the producing team, you can become an associate producer of this show for $17.76 a month. $17.76 a month gets you associate producer. Producer is $18.36 a month, and executive producer is $25 or more, if you like. And all you guys get the same shout out like you just got here, all included in that. You get included in all the show notes, included in all the emails and everything that we send out. And executive producers get to come on the show with us and for like an hour or so. So check it out. Wednesdays with Wayne. That's what that's all about. That's what we did on Wednesday night. So check it out. All right. If you can help us out that way, we'd appreciate it. Or you can do a one-time donation, any amount, a recurring donation in any amount. No matter how you go about it, we appreciate it as long as you have the means to do it. All of our crypto wallet information's up there on the page as well. You can check it out there on the support page. And thank you, of course, to the folks that are listening on the audio streams and the modern podcast apps that are streaming sats to us. Sats are just micropayments of Bitcoin. Thank you so much for those. We do appreciate those. You can get those apps at modernpodcastapps.com and podcastindex.org. And let me make sure I got everything. Yes, we do. We are good. I think that's all I got for you tonight, folks. So, again, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Don't forget, head over to the website, joerooz.com, joerooz.com, and send us over a message. All right, folks, make Texas independent again. Go podcasting. Keep a steady stride. Keep talking. See you Sunday.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together?
Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather.
Happy trails.